I am super excited to welcome to the stage Dr. Effie Pylarinou and Dean Ian Wilson. Dr. Effie, she is a global fintech and tech thought leader, the top woman voice in fintech, an author, a speaker, a faculty on the future of money and fintech at the Fast Future Executive. Welcome, Dr. Effie. Then we welcome Dr. Ian Williamson, Dean of the Paul Merage School of Business at the University of California in Irvine. Welcome. So Dr. Effie and Dean Ian Williamson is going to be talking about living to love the fast blur, talking about how work has changed, how the workers have changed, and how leadership must change. Thank you. Turning it over to you, Dr. Effie.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Dean Williamson, dear co-authors. We, the faculty, the authors of this book, we are very excited for this event this evening. We are at our heart explorers. We are really explorers of this universe, this intelligent universe that is full of constellations, of nodes, of visible and invisible interconnections. And in our book, our new book, The Fast Future Blur, my co-authors and myself, we explore these dynamic interconnections. And we really want to invite you on a future-gazing walk this afternoon to look at these interconnections between advanced technologies, socioeconomic trends, and environmental trends. Right now, we live at a time that we all agree will transform the way we live, the way we earn our livelihood, the way we connect and communicate with each other. And while we're all very familiar with the accelerated pace of change, with the challenges that come with this, with the distortions in our ability to grasp these developments and understand their impact, it's exactly these blurrings that hide the opportunities, and they are surrounding us everywhere. I see these blurs today as launch pads for us to leap forward into our future. I invite you to see these blurs as bright openings in the edges of our horizons. I invite you to see them as opportunities to advance and progress into our future. And I want to invite you for a moment to sort of forget about the blurs that you're familiar with, like industry blurs, like the blurs between physical and remote work, or blurs that are at the areas of e-commerce, the boundaries of e-commerce, or healthcare, all these familiar blurs. And let's go to a very future-gazing work of blurs. I also want to invite you to leave the polycrisis, the risks that are associated with these uncertainties and are very closely monitored by the Global Council from the World Economic Forum. Again, our choice is to focus on the opportunities that are hidden at the intersection of these advanced technologies, the socioeconomic and environmental trends. it's these blurs that we started looking at in our book and in our research. And we started looking at how the blur between digital platforms, which are very successful business models nowadays, are blurring with the regenerative economy principles and creating opportunities to transform every aspect of digital platforms and transform them into deep regenerative types of businesses. We looked at the blur of artificial intelligence with every aspect, every facet, every dimension of businesses, because that's where the next level of intelligence in business will be developed. And that we will have businesses that are born as what we call AI native businesses, which is a completely different mindset. We will be looking at the blur of artificial intelligence and the healthcare industry and what is the immense social impact from that blur. Over to the blur between the future of work and blockchain that will lead us to deconstructed and decentralized ways of working. Over to the blur between mobility and the metaverse, which is really reframing the way we will be living in smart cities and what does smart living look like. Think of these blurs and look at them because they are important in many ways. They touch upon every aspect of our life. They touch upon the way we live, the way we work, the way our businesses are run, the way we take care of our health, the way we move, the way we live. What does the smart living future look like? What does the future of work look like? It's all about reframing and looking at these opportunities, and that's the invitation of our book and of our thinking. It's about grasping opportunities before they become obvious and tapping into these opportunities. Really living to love the future that is created by grasping these opportunities and creating that future, which is one that we want to live in. This is the kind of complexity that might be daunting, but our invitation is that these blurs are not there to be seen as challenges to be overcome, but rather as opportunities to create a future that we love to live in. I want to invite you this afternoon to shift to an open mindset and see these blurs, the ones that we discuss in our book, as these opportunities and not as challenges to be overcome. As you will be listening to my esteemed co-authors discuss their frameworks, the ones that we have selected as important interconnections in our book, I want you again to feel that these are concepts that you can take to your businesses, to your organizations, to your interests, to your industries, and apply them towards a world that is full of opportunities and is the type of future that we want to live in. And with that, I will give it over to Dean Williamson.
Thank you, Dr. Effie. I will maybe start by saying welcome to the University of California, Irvine. It is our pleasure to host this event today. I think the sign of a great university is always the quality of the conversation that happens on its grounds. And certainly this is the type of conversation that we envisioned when we created the institution. And I think it's the thing that allows us to continue to be one of the leading institutions in the country. So this concept of blurs. Now I should say I am an HR professor, so my focus is on talent management. So I am inherently interested in understanding how these blurs that are occurring, how are they impacting work? What does it mean for us as we think about leading organizations today and into the future? So I'm going to dive into a little deep into one of the areas that you touched on, which is the future of work. Now, I personally believe that it's very clear to me that the blurs that are happening in our environment around a wide variety of things, whether it be between the economic and social issues, different forms of technology, geopolitical issues, all of these things that are happening, what they are doing in many respects is they are making many of the ways we've approached leading workplaces irrelevant and ineffective. That's probably not the best way to start a presentation. That's pretty downing type of, but I think this is what's happening. And what is occurring is that many of the practices that we had in place were designed inherently for a time in the past, and now they're under pressure. Why would I say that? What evidence would I suggest to say that they're ineffective or irrelevant? Well, certainly if we look at some of the outcomes of what an effective workplace looks like, the outcomes that we use as choice are suffering. And so we know productivity, if we look at the UK or the EU or the United States, has been stagnant in most developing economies for quite a long period of time. Despite the fact that we've invested heavily in technology, we've not seen increases in productivity that we have grown accustomed to. We know that the workers that we have in the workplace, their engagement scores are certainly not increasing. In fact, the satisfaction scores in many workplaces have plateaued or going down. We also know that people don't just vote with their heart, they vote with their feet, and so voluntary turnover has consistently increased over the last decade. We had quite a bit of discussion a few years ago around the Great Resignation. It was interesting that got a lot of coverage, but the reality was we had seen a decade of year-on-year increase in voluntary turnover before we got to 2022. That's just continued the trend. The dissatisfaction or perhaps the inability to engage effectively with employers has led to increased interest in unionization in many parts of the world. And I think this is another indication that the work practices that many organizations have in place are simply not fit for the type of experiences that workers are going through. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, many of us have talked about an epidemic associated with mental health. And work, as it turns out, is one of the bigger drivers of mental well-being or a lack of mental health. And so what is going on in the workplace that is causing individuals to experience record numbers of anxiety and depression? Well, I think part of this is because the workplaces were designed for something differently than what we're having to deal with today. And so my first point here is one of the reasons why I think we're dealing with this challenge is that the work itself has changed. What do I mean by that? Well, much of our thinking on how to manage a workplace was developed during a time when manufacturing was the dominant mechanism of how we generated economic outcomes, not just in this country, but in many countries around the world. And if you think about the logic that underpins that, if you're trying to make something, you typically want to make the same thing more than once. That's good. As many times as possible, as many times you can sell it, typically. And you like to make it the same way every time so that you have a sense of quality and consistency. Well, if you think about a workforce, then everything you're doing in your workforce is to create a standardized process. The idea being that I can create a process, put a person into that process, they'll be productive, and they can do it over and over and over again, and that's how I'll have a high sense of quality and consistency. That's what you want in a manufacturing setting. And oftentimes the processes will be very specific to your firm, the things you're trying to do. And as a result, because the things that the worker is doing is very specific to your firm, it's actually not so easy for the individual to leave because that process, that skill, that activity is very unique to what you're doing. That's contrast to how we make money today. We are a service economy. Most countries in the world are service economies. That's the vast proportion of how we make money and what our activity is. The optimal outcome in a service economy is not a standardized experience. That is not what you want. The optimal customer experience that you claim to have whenever you go to your favorite place, it's not because it was the same as what everybody else got. It's because, in fact, it was exactly the opposite. It was unique to you. It was customized to you. And so in that environment, what you really want individuals to be is not consistent. You want them to be creative. You want them to be innovative. You want them to have empathy. You want them to have discretion. Standardization is exactly not what you want in that environment. And so in those situations, it's not firm-specific investments that you're talking about. It's actually more generalized skill sets around intellect, personality, empathy that the individual brings to the table. You don't want to constrain that. You want to unleash that. That's what you want in a service-based economy. And it turns out those skill sets, they're not firm-specific. They actually can generalize and be used in a wide variety of firms. So the actual work has changed. We are a service economy designed to create customized experiences. And much of what we've thought about in terms of managing the workforce was around a standardized experience. The other aspect around it that I think is important to appreciate, the workers themselves have changed. First and foremost, there's just not as many of them as we once had. We are dealing with a shortage of a workforce. This is the part that I think oftentimes gets understated when we talk about all the things that are going on. The Great Resignation, in part, was driven by the fact that we just don't have enough people for the work. And part of this is because we're aging. Obviously, this is not unique to the United States, but in many countries are further ahead, and some are catching up rapidly, like China. But we're aging. The fastest growing portion of the working population in the United States, people over the age of 75. Look at the numbers. It's actually quite amazing. People over the age of 65 are expected to double in size by 2050. We're getting older. And it is not going to be uncommon for all of us to be managing workforces that are 3- and 4-generation workforces. I have the 18-year-olds and I have the 85-year-olds. They're all on my payroll. Right? The workforce has changed. Do you think the 85-year-old is coming to work for the same reason as the 18-year-old? No, they're definitely not. And they are bringing with them a wide variety of diverse expectations. And what's even more interesting is they've appreciated that they are in demand and I need them. And so in the past, while we might have perhaps not had the confidence to express our preferences to our employer, because we go, well, if I speak up too much, maybe I'll get replaced. What do you think today's generation of workers are thinking? No, I'm definitely going to tell you what I want, and the expectation is you're going to do that and more. And we tend to criticize the young ones for saying this, but I don't know, I have some pretty demanding 80-year-olds that work for me as well. Everybody wants what they want when they want it. That's just the way it works. And so the workers have changed. You're expecting them to do different things. We want you to be innovative and customized and high empathy and have high levels of discretion. They're expecting us to give them what they want when they want it to make this work experience worthwhile. And that is not what we designed these organizations to do in the first place, if we're really honest. And so the last point I'll simply make is, as a result, leadership must change. So I was having a conversation with someone and they stated that we're having a crisis of talent. I don't know if we're having a crisis of talent, but I definitely think we're having a crisis of leadership. That I don't think there's anything wrong with the work changing. Actually, I'd much rather be doing service work than manufacturing work, if given the choice. And I don't think there's anything wrong with the workforce changing. Great, I can work with my mother, my grandfather, and my son at the same time, fine. But I do think it's a problem if the leaders in our organizations are not prepared and capable of dealing with this. So just a few things that I've observed in the work that I've been doing. The future of leadership, what does that look like? Well, one, it's leaders that understand that you need to strategically invest in talent. Now, we say this all the time, but there's a difference, right? So in many organizations, their optimizing mentality is, what is the fewest number of people I can get to do this job at the lowest price? And if you're really honest, and if you look at how many organizations are run, if you look at how they measure what they measure, it really boils down to that assumption. What is the fewest number of people I can get to do this job at the lowest price? That's an expense orientation towards leadership. My sense is that is not going to get it done. In fact, what you really want are leaders that have an asset orientation towards leadership. in their perspective, the whole goal is how can I get the most value out of the knowledge and the relationships that people possess. And in fact, what they really focus on is not how many people or not how low a price. What are the complementary investments I have to put in place to get the most out of the people that I have? Now, of course, if you say complementary investments, the CFO in the room goes, that sounds like more money. And it is. The CEO in the room goes, that sounds like a better return. And there's a big difference, right? So one, they have to adjust their mentality about what does it mean to invest in talent. Secondly, if you're going to ask individuals to have high levels of discretion, empathy, and creativity, you need to create a workplace that's built around a notion of trust and flexibility. So there's been a lot of debate and arguments around flexible work and remote work and 4-day work week and all these things. What this is really pointing out is you need to create an environment that actually is a buffet that allows individuals, whether they be 18 or 85, to find joy and meaning and fulfillment in what you're doing and know they're not all going to take the same thing. So can you create an environment that actually meets those needs? That sounds like it's more complex. It is. But again, that sounds like there's a greater opportunity for a better return. And finally, we're going to have to be leaders in a lot of different platforms. And the way I'll sum this up is today's leaders have to win an Emmy, a Tony, and an Oscar. Right? They have to be great on the big screen. They have to entertain me for 22 minutes. And if I put them on a stage, they better bring the house down. Because they're going to have to do it in person, remotely, and in pre-recorded materials. Think about how many of your leaders were ever trained to do those things. And so leadership is going to have to change so we can meet the challenges that the blurs are providing and realize these opportunities. I think that's very exciting. I think that's what we're trying to do in our business school, is to develop those type of leaders. But I think it does present the opportunity for us in this room and for others to re-envision what does leadership look like going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wow, that's wonderful. We'd love any Q&A from the audience, please. Anyone have any questions? Hands? Yes. Thank you.
First of all, thank you so much. I really, your perspective about the future of work, that's very good. The fast future blur, as a leader of today, I feel that we humans have a lot of potential. We have brought humanity from cave age to today's age, and we have the potential to solve these future blurs, not seeing as blurs, but very clear and clear signs that we can achieve it, because our actions and decisions today are very important, and they can make a difference. And what do you think about that?
Well, again, I don't think there's anything predetermined to suggest that any of the things that we're experiencing that on the slides are bad. I actually don't think there's I think it'd be inappropriate to use the word bad or good. They're happening. The determination as to whether or not something is bad or good ultimately in an organization is about skill. So if AI is happening and you don't know anything about AI, it's bad, right? If AI is happening and you know a lot about AI, it's really good. And so I think the focus then becomes, what are the things that we need to ensure that we're developing in ourselves and in the people that we're responsible for, so that they look at these situations and they can actually see and realize the opportunity. Things are only really blurry when you're not good at it. And so I think there's just no substitute for skill in this. And that means we have to really be wise about how we invest in our people and invest in our time.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, please come on up. Thank you.
My question is, what can a young person do to change the leadership in wherever they're working as an employee?
Can you repeat the question? I didn't hear it.
Yes. Okay. What can a young person do to help leadership evolve as an employee, as a young employee?
Very good question. Communication is paramount in any type of relationship. So yes, we expect from leaders to establish trust, but I think it's also important that the younger generation be very good at communicating their needs. And I think, you know, we're at an inflection point. Dean Williamson, you spoke about a change in leadership. I always like to think that we are shifting from a task-oriented economy to a people-centric economy, where leaders are invited to think of their people as assets. And I think that type of narrative has to be reinforced and communicated from your end, the younger generation, to the leaders. What do you want? You are an asset for the company, for the employer, for the ecosystem, and think of yourself that way instead of somebody who's completing a task and is measured on that KPI. So I think taking that type of stance will help leaders understand how you can sort of be a better employee, be a better team player.
Yeah, I'll just add, you know, be mindful of the fact that whether you're older or younger, newer, or have more experience, you know, you're in a relationship. That's the whole notion of trust. And so meet me halfway, right? So it's great for you to tell me what you want, but it's also great for you to explain to me how you're going to help us accomplish this collective task that you're here for. We didn't create this organization to make you happy, per se. We created this organization to accomplish a task which hopefully makes you happy, right? There's a collective activity here. And so one of the things that I would challenge any employee, but particularly a younger employee, is think about how what you're doing will allow us to accomplish this task. If you talk to me about it in that way, then it's much easier for me to say, oh, okay, I can really trust you because you're embedded into and you committed to what we're trying to do collectively, versus you just saying what you want, right? And okay, well, I can align to that people, they can tell me what they want, but how is that going to allow us to accomplish something? So go that second step to meet whoever is in your organization halfway to say, this is what I want, and oh, by the way, this is how I think we can achieve the collective goal that we set out to achieve.
Thank you so much for sharing such powerful insights. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.